Hello, my name is Isaiah. Today's presentation is on Intel. Intel supplies microprocessors. Microprocessor. Hello, my name is Isaiah. This presentation is on Intel. Intel supplies microprocessors for computer manufacturers such as Lenovo, HP, and Dell. Intel also manufactures motherboard chipsets, network interface controllers, integrated circuits, flash memory, graphics chips, and embedded processors. Gordon Moore, one of the co-founders of Intel, and a former member of Fairchild Semiconductors, is also the author of Moore's Law. Robert Noyce, same as Moore, was a former member of Fairchild Semiconductors, but more noticeably, he was on the team that invented the first integrated circuit. Intel is derived from integrated electronics. This is the name that the two had finalized on. They struggled with the rights to it because it was already owned, so they had to pay $15,000 for the trademark. Noyce and Moore were growing restless. Fairchild Semiconductors operated as a subsidiary of Fairchild Camera and Instrument, and they felt the parent company wasn't reinvesting enough of the proceeds from the highly profitable semiconductor business into the research and development of new semiconductor technologies. In 1968, Noyce and Moore resigned from Fairchild. Noyce explained his hopes for the future in his letter of resignation, which I will read at the end. So Intel began operations on August 1st with about a dozen engineers working from a conference room in the old Union Carbide building on Middlefield Road in Mountain View, California. For most of its first year, the company focused exclusively on R&D, wanting to develop technologies no one else offered. At the time, Moore described the full facility as larger than we need. Intel did not stay small for long, however. By the end of its third calendar year of operations, the company had already contributed several of the most important inventions of the 20th century. They started making a profit and outgrew the facility that Moore had considered too large. 1101 and 1103 were memory chips that Intel had developed as kind of their first couple of projects. The 1103, a 1 kilobit dynamic random access memory chip, was successful in the first chip to store a significant amount of information. It was purchased by Honeywell in 1970 to replace the core memory technology in its computers. Because DRAMs were cheaper and used less power than core memory, they quickly became the standard memory devices in computers worldwide. Bizcom was a Japanese calculator company and had asked Intel to develop a 12-chip set to handle the operations for a desktop calculator. Intel considered itself a memory chip company at the time, but it had been operative less than 2 years and accepted the Bizcom contract rather than forego a business development opportunity. However, when Intel engineer Ted Hoff began work on the project, he quickly realized that Bizcom's design concept was too cumbersome to operate properly. He set out to create an alternative, and the project he launched would lead to one of the most important inventions in the history of information technology, the Intel 4004 programmable microprocessor. All chips had their logic programming custom built into their physical architecture, an approach that made their research and development prohibitively expensive, which created a shortage of engineers and made devices comparatively large and cumbersome. The 4004 would replace that system with a general purpose chip that would be mass produced and then programmed through its software to perform specific functions, such as those of a desktop calculator. That idea could make computing cheaper, more powerful, and smaller in one go. It could, in other words, facilitate the modern information age. Hoff was not the only one on this team who developed the 4004. Fagan, Maser, and a gentleman from Bizcom, Masatoshi Shima, who later joined Intel, finished the 4000 series. by early 1971. Ironically, Bizicom, who owned the exclusive rights to the world-changing device, was unhappy with it. The bottom had fallen out of the desktop calculator during the marketing demo. So Bizcom wanted to renegotiate the price for the product. In May 1971, at the urging of the team that had developed Hoff, Fagan, Mason, Shima, Robert Noyce repurchased rights to the chip for everything but calculators in exchange for returning Bizcom's $60,000 investment in its development. This proved a wrong move for Bizcom. Bizcom wound up going bankrupt in 1974, while Intel went on to become a global powerhouse with nearly $60 billion in annual revenue, statistics show in 2017, all of which stemmed to some extent from the microprocessor industry the company established and the modern age that came with it. So Intel goes from memory chip to very successful microprocessor company producing. In 1972, Intel introduced the first 8-bit microprocessor, the 8008. Victor Port and Harry Pyle were the ones responsible for the instruction set and architecture. Fagan, previously mentioned from the 4004 project team, was project lead for this chip. In 1974, the Intel 8080 microprocessor was introduced with 10 times the power of the 8008. Its 40-pin package made it easier to interface than the 18-pin 8008 and also made its data bus more efficient. Its instruction set was enhanced, and its full 16-bit address bus enabled it to access 64 kilobytes of memory, 4 times more than the 8008's range of 16. In 1975, the 8080 microprocessor was used in one of the first consumer home computers, the Altair 8800, which was sold in kit form. And the Altair 8800 was very popular at the time, kind of had like that Apple buzz. Onward from the 8000 series is the Pentium. The Pentium was the first Intel chip for PCs to use parallel or superscalar processing, which significantly increased its speed. It had 3.1 million transistors, compared with the 1.2 million transistors of its predecessor. Microsoft Windows operating system, in conjunction with this, made a significant expansion of the PC market. Although business still bought most PCs, the higher performance Pentium machines made it possible for consumers to use PCs for multimedia graphical applications such as games that require more processing power. And Intel business strategy relied on making newer microprocessors dramatically faster than previous ones to entice buyers to upgrade their PCs. One way to accomplish this was to manufacture chips with vastly more transistors in each device. For example, the 8080, the 8088 found in the first IBM PC had 29,000 transistors. Going up 4 years later, 275,000 transistors. And then in 2008, with the Core 2, 800 million transistors. Titanium in 2012 with 3.1 billion. And this, you can see in this graph, is a direct representation of Moore's law, stating that the components double approximately every 2 years. With all of the success in developing and innovating microprocessor chips, all these models, Intel's famed technical prowess met a flaw, the Pentium flaw. Its greatest mistake was because an obscure segment among the Pentium CPU's 3.1 million transistors performed division incorrectly. Company engineers discovered the problem after the product's release in 1993, but decided to keep quiet and fix the problem in updates to the chip. Not such an ethically good thing, just trying to patch it up with band-aids. Thomas Nicely of Lynchburg College in West Virginia also discovered the flaw. Uh-oh. This means that this flaw was not just privately known to Intel, but now to the public. At the time, CEO Grove resisted requests to recall the product, but since Thomas came out and spoke not so nicely about this flaw, IBM announced it would not ship computers with the CPU. It forced a recall that cost Intel $475 million. During the 90s, Intel invested heavily in new microprocessor designs, fostering the rapid growth of the computer industry. During this period, Intel became the dominant supplier of microprocessors for PCs and was known for aggressive and anti-competitive tactics in defense of its market position, particularly against AMD, Advanced Micro Devices. But all the while, they were in partnership with Microsoft. This Wintel duo continued just to crush the competition for a good amount of time. Rival products like AMD, Motorola, and Sun Microsystems didn't really threaten Intel's market share. But all good things must come to an end, somewhat. In 1999, they were facing accusations of being monopolies, and in 1999, Microsoft was being found guilty in a U.S. District Court of being a monopolist after being sued by the Department of Justice, while in 2009, the European Union fined Intel $1.45 billion for alleged monopolistic actions. In 2009, Intel also paid AMD $1.25 billion to settle a decades-long legal dispute in which AMD accused Intel of pressuring PC makers not to use the former's chips. Till this day, AMD is a big rival to Intel and arguably has the upper hand on Intel's chips within this past year or two with their latest high-end chip. Basically, just having literal more bandwidth with more cores and more threads. The legal dispute was between Intel and AMD with that in 2009 with that $1.25 billion settlement. But pushing on, Intel wanted other smaller PC makers to get their products and therefore Intel's chips to market faster, so it began to design and build motherboards that contained all the essential parts of the computer, including graphics and networking chips. So by 1995, the company was selling more than 10 million motherboards to PC makers, about 40% of the overall PC market. But since then, to today, there has been substantial and really competitive motherboard manufacturers. Going on with revenue, Intel's revenue not so currently, but as of 2020, half of it is made of a little over, not by much. Half of it is made by client computing. A little over a quarter is made by data centers. And then very small percentages are made by non-volatile memory, Internet of Things, and programmable solutions. The direction Intel is going in has been consistent, and I think the part of the letter that was part of Robert Noyce's resignation still stands true to today. I will read that now. I do not expect to join any company which is simply a manufacturer of semiconductors. I would rather try to find some small company which is trying to develop some product or technology which no one has yet done. To stay dependent, I might form a new company after a vacation. So we can see that Intel's forefathers, their mantra has carried out throughout the years, and they've just been pushing and pushing. making a commitment to continued innovation as a fundamental component of their company's culture. Our silicon Intel states our silicon and software are essential for moving, storing, and processing data faster and more securely than ever before. Advancing these technologies allows us to help our customers solve their greatest challenges. Intel really wants to create world-changing technology that enriches the lives of every person on Earth. And this concludes the presentation. Thank you. Resources I'd like to shout out are Britannica and Intel themselves. They have a great resource for their history.